Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome back to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Peter Baracchini, and once again, I'm always joined by my colleagues and fellow Maple Leaf writers over at the Hockey Writers, Alex Hobson and Shane Seney. Boys, hockey is back. The Maple Leafs are in the full swing of things. 2-1 to start the season. We got a lot to talk about, but first, how are you all doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I was just over in the UK for the first time. So I brought back this nice Irish cap and was happy to watch some regular season hockey, but great to see you, boys.
The hat looks great. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Just gearing up for another Sunday of football. That's pretty much the one thing on my mind right now since we got all the hockey out of our system yesterday. So go Jaguars.
A great fun-filled day full of sports, but we're here to talk about hockey and the Maple Leafs. And as always, once again, this episode is brought to you by morningskate.io, the daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday, jam-packed with the best hockey stuff on the planet. It's where you get your daily dose of news, rumors, histories, funnies, quizzes, you name it. All the fun and information brought to you by the terrific writing staff over at the Hockey Writers. Just put your email in the link in the description below and you're all set to go. So to kick off the show, obviously it is the biggest talking point. Actually, it was the biggest talking point all off season, and that was Matt Murray's injury history. And lo and behold, after the 4-3 loss against the Montreal Canadiens, before he was about to take the net against the Ottawa Senators, he was placed on long-term injured reserve, will miss about a minimum of 4 weeks due to an adductor injury. Obviously, this is a really big blow, and obviously, this is one of Kyle Dubas's big risks in the offseason. Shane, what are your initial thoughts on this, and how much of a blow is this to the Maple Leafs goaltending?
Can't say I was super surprised to see him go down early because of his track record, but obviously we don't wish any wrongdoing on anyone, but it's actually a blessing in disguise. It's allowed them to have a little bit more financial flexibility. It's given Ilya Samsonov a chance to really take the reins as a number one. Of course, if he was to go down, then things kind of can turn sour really quick. But it sucks for Murray because he was in a good spot where he looked great in the preseason. He didn't look too good in that first game of the year, but he did look good in the preseason and looked like he was going to build off that. And unfortunately, the tracks got derailed pretty quick here. So it's given the Leafs some flexibility. It's pretty sad that, it's actually a good thing for the team as a whole. But we'll see how Samsonov can run with it. But it's tough for Murray because he was in a good spot to really move things along early on this season. And unfortunately, that's not going to be the case.
Alex, we've always talked about goaltending depth and how it's a big issue last season. Now that they had two capable 1A starters with Samsonov taking the reins right now and Erik Källgren being called up as the backup right now after taking a big hit in the AHL. It looks okay, but obviously no worse for wear as he was able to suit up for the Maple Leafs. Are you concerned with the goaltending depth at all, or you're fairly confident that with what the Maple Leafs have, this is going to, try and work itself out?
I would say cautiously optimistic is probably the right way to put it, because I think that as good as Samsonov looked in the second game of the season, and then obviously the game against Ottawa on Saturday, I think it's important to remember that we are only 2 games in. And, I think he came into the season, we all knew about Murray's injury history, but I think he definitely came into the season expecting to at least be going back and forth with Matt Murray, similar to how Campbell and Mrazek were supposed to last year. And obviously Mrazek got injured 2 games into the season. So Campbell had to take on that workload early on. And now it looks like Samsonov's in a similar position. I think it can only realistically mean a good thing for the team in the sense that you guys mentioned the open cap relief, which is kind of funny to think that Murray going down with an injury is somehow a positive for the Leafs. But at the same time, I think not only does it give them that extra cap flexibility, but it gives Samsonov a true opportunity to really start running away with the job. And I don't say run away with the job because, one good month, there's 6 months to play hockey. So if he has one good month, it's probably not going to lock him up in that 1A role for the entire year. But we've been talking about it all summer about how these goalies are going to be battling for playing time with each other. And the internal competition can only help the Leafs because in the end, they're in a position where they can't really afford to be playing favorites between the two netminders. They're probably going to go with just who's playing better. And if you're in Samsonov's shoes, then you have a chance right off the bat to prove why you should be the number one goalie. And then if you're in Matt Murray's shoes, then you're looking forward to coming back from an injury. He's only going to be out, like you said, for maybe a couple of weeks. So when Murray comes back, then at that point, he's going to be looking to get back into the crease. And I'm sure he doesn't want to be riding the pine because he got injured in his not the first game of the season, but one of the first practices after that game. So I think it's really interesting. Hopefully this means the Leafs get a look at Nick Robertson, as we're going to mention he got called up. So it'll be interesting to pay attention to for sure.
Yeah, for me, the biggest takeaway is, there was a lot of, obviously, again, the big risk involved with Murray's injury history, but I think this was the perfect opportunity for him to try and get over that injury history in the past and try and find a new start. And it looked like that in the preseason. And then all of a sudden, the injury bug comes back and it hits him big time. And obviously, I've been a big proponent or supporter of a Matt Murray redemption story because who doesn't like to see a player that has struggled in the past with injuries come back and then have the stand-up performance that he has. And I've gotten quite a bit of heat online for saying that, Matt Murray is like my bold prediction is Matt Murray is going to be a Vezina finalist. And then all of a sudden he gets injured. And you know what? I don't care anymore because I still believe that if this is probably a good situation for Matt Murray before the injury, because he does have a better team in front of him, albeit the game against Montreal did not look that great. Then again, the team in front of him didn't look that great either. So there was no help for him in that first game. But if there was the help, I'm pretty sure we've seen in the preseason that if there's a team in front of Matt Murray and he's stopping the puck very well, chances are it's going to be a very low scoring game for the opponent because, there were times where we saw their best team and, Matt Murray shined against them. So I'm hoping that he pulls through. I hope that when he comes back, he's healthy and he's over. Obviously, you don't want to say over it because you don't know anything can happen because of his history. But at the same time, I just hope that he's healthy. He comes back and he plays up to the standard that the Maple Leafs have for him and that he has for himself. Moving on, and speaking of Ilya Samsonov, obviously this is his net now. In his 2 games already, just looking at natural stat trick, I'm going for the 5-on-5 stats. He has looked pretty good. 932 save percentage at even strength, and the biggest one for me is the 938 high danger save percentage. Only 1 goal against, with 16 shots against. Obviously looking pretty good. And if you compare that to Jack Campbell, we don't want to try and make this the whole thing about Jack Campbell, but 853 save percentage and 400 high danger save percentage in his 2 games with the Edmonton Oilers. Obviously, we're not going to talk about Campbell because that's for like a different episode or when we get to a Leafs versus Campbell matchup again in the future. But at the same time, Ilya Samsonov is looking pretty good. Alex, obviously he allowed 2 really questionable goals, one for sure against Washington. Has he settled himself in, and is he mentally ready for the challenges and the scrutiny that Toronto has of its goaltending?
Well, I mean, I think if you read his quote from the post game yesterday, he said, "I'm always ready" when he was asked about the upcoming workload. And if nothing else, you like to see that kind of confidence from a goalie who's about to start a lot of games. So, I think he's looked good so far. I think he allowed a couple of weak goals in that game against Washington, but he got the win against his former team, which obviously you love to see. And he looked stable last night as well. I honestly can't really say that either of the goals that Ottawa scored on him were, that you can make an argument that he should have had them, but at the same time, I know Claude Giroux's was definitely in a high danger area and Shane Pinto scored on the power play. So overall, the stats look good on the score sheet, and he kept them in the game with some big saves, including that giveaway in front of the net by TJ Brody. I can't remember who got the shot off, but when Samsonov had to kind of can't believe I'm forgetting the word. He kind of had to sprawl and make that
save.
Yeah, desperation save. There's another word that was in my mind, but I couldn't come up with it for some reason. Scramble, that's the word.
There you go.
Okay,
early morning.
Now that we've moved, yeah, it is almost noon as we're recording this, so I can't really make that argument. But overall, yeah, I think the big thing for him was that he was, like you said, he made a lot of saves in high danger areas, and he made a lot of saves to keep them in the game when they needed him to. And I also think that he just looks calm in the net. He looks stable, and I think that's obviously got to be a big part of your game if you're going to be a goalie in Toronto, especially in the circumstances where they are right now. So I'm happy with what I've seen so far. Still cautiously optimistic though, because he's a young guy. He's going to be getting a lot of starts this year, maybe more than we anticipated. So it's another question that I think I'd like to revisit at the end of the month.
No, definitely. We want to see that more of a bigger sample than just 2 games. And Shane, Alex mentioned he looks more stable and more composed in net. How much of this is attributed to the fact that, new goalie coach Curtis Sanford is coming in and, maybe helping him in regards to the fact that maybe he saw a lot of Samsonov's being very sporadic and very, aggressive with his movement in the crease. How much is this having an effect on him?
Yeah, it looks that way. It looks like he's playing a nice, quiet game. I've been really impressed with his ability to track the puck when there's a lot of traffic in front. Those long shots that really can go anywhere. He's done a good job with that. Another thing that stands out for me too is his glove. He's made some nice glove saves. Nothing too fancy, but the ones that he's supposed to catch, he is. And you can go back to the first game with Murray, and that wasn't the case. So he's done well with that. And 3 would be his ability to play the puck. He's done that a couple times where he's fired it up the sideboards and started the rush. So, that's something to look forward to and keep your eye on, I guess you would say, just because anytime a new goalie and a new defense core, you got to work on that chemistry on when to get the puck, when to leave it, when to fire it up and all those things. So the new goalie coach is definitely been able to kind of keep him quiet and keep him sound in the crease, stop chasing the puck. He did that a little bit in Washington. So no, he's looked great. And like we said, he's got that chance to really run with it now. They get Arizona Monday. I think they don't play again till Thursday. So he's going to get those 2 starts by the looks of it. So what he does with it, who knows, right? He's got that, I think he's at 920 overall save percentage. And if he can hover around that mark all year, then Toronto's going to be in good shape.
That's the one thing that has eluded the Maple Leafs for some time, having a goaltender with a 915, 920 save percentage, just about like try and be at that league average kind of thing. And, Samsonov is proving it right now. I will say that at the beginning, his handling of the puck was very questionable, but as you mentioned, Shane, he did have a couple of nice breakout passes to try and generate rush chances or to lead the rush or push the play up. Sorry. But yeah, I think he has also looked fantastic. I think that I agree that Sanford has had a big impact on him. Obviously, maybe not so much for Murray, but obviously when he gets back and he gets healthy, hopefully Murray can, regain the chemistry that he has and maintain that level competitive drive that Sanford is instilling in both of them right now. I do think that from here on out, Samsonov is going to maybe solidify his spot as a number 1 goaltender. I mean, at certain points, I think even when we talked to Alex on 6 in the 6, that if there's going to be an injury to Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov is playing well, look out. Ilya Samsonov may be difficult to push off because he's got a lot to prove, similar to Murray, but he's younger. And maybe I'm going to get into a question right now, and this is going to be a quick fire. And you know how we always love to overreact to everything in Leafland. Is Ilya Samsonov playing himself out of a contract right now? I might as well just get it out of the way because we all know it's going to happen in, come 2 months' time. He's going to need a new contract, and then they're going to say, is Ilya Samsonov too much for the Maple Leafs? Alex, will that happen?
Well, Ilya Samsonov is an RFA after the end of the season. So
so then never mind. But
no,
yeah,
that works in the Leafs' favor.
There we go.
And if any team out there wants to offer sheet them, cough, cough, Carolina, Samsonov, if he has a good enough season that he can be commanding $4 or $5 million or whatever, I think that's a first and a third at least for the Leafs. So I think this is a win-win situation, regardless of how the media wants to approach it later on.
You know, it's funny. I have Cap Friendly, and I completely forgot that he is RFA status. So that my question is just completely irrelevant at this point. But
I think you were setting me up for that perfectly, Peter.
Yeah, I will say this: even though that he is an RFA, Shane, is it possible that the Maple Leafs can extend him to a 4 or 5 year deal, roughly as what Alex mentioned, maybe 4 or 5 mil?
Yeah, I think the best case scenario is he goes on a little run to start the year and they're confident in his game. And I could see something around a 3-year deal. I don't think it's just the whole track record with Anderson, with Campbell, with Mrazek, like Dubas's recent history with goaltending has just been weird. It's been off the charts. Like it's crazy to me to think that he wouldn't pay Freddie Anderson $4.5 million, but then is paying Matt Murray more than that. So it's been strange, but I think the best case scenario is he goes on a little run. He's locked in, like Alex has said. He's got minimal leverage. So I think he's going to stick around at this point, but it's 3 games, so we gotta wait. We gotta wait and see here.
And I know we're going to get a lot of comments. Why are we jumping the gun with this? Well, you know what? At some point, someone's going to talk about that. But at the same time,
so far, I said it's been 3 games twice, and Shane said it once. So just for the record, we're being patient here.
We're trying.
We are being patient. And I do think that at some point, if he continues to play well, I think he will earn a new contract. And I think maybe at like kind of like the Jack Campbell contract, they were hesitant to giving him that extra year. I think with right now Samsonov being 25 years old, you can afford to maybe give him that 5, if maybe a 6-year deal, because he is a little bit younger and obviously a lot to prove still. But we want to see that progression. We want to see that consistency in the crease. So Ilya Samsonov is doing everything he can right now, and he just needs to continue doing so. So we'll see where it goes from there. Next topic of discussion, and this is a very polarizing defensive pair, as it has been for the last 2 seasons. Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl. Obviously, they did not have a really great first game against the Montreal Canadiens. They, much like everybody else, they were a step behind, very slow with their reaction time, out of position quite a bit. But then you look at the game against the Washington Capitals and Ottawa Senators, and they look pretty decent, like the consistent second pairing that you want to see in a shutdown role. Justin Holl making shot blocks and getting in on the offense, scoring the game-winning goal. Jake Muzzin clogging up the lane and, making big-time hits. Shane, is this pairing kind of like a do-or-die situation this season for them because of, the scrutiny they face with all their piled-on mistakes and ability to not be as consistent as possible?
There's definitely a bigger spotlight on those two, I would say. And considering like Brody and Riley I think they're -3 each, and nobody's talking about that. But yeah, I haven't liked what I've seen so far from either of Muzzin or Holl. I feel like there's been a sloppy start to the year. They haven't been crisp with outlet passes. I call them sometimes rally killers, where the puck goes around, they keep possession, and then Muzzin or Holl get it, and the next thing you know, it's either a turnover or it's iced or it's it's just the puck's given up. So it was great to see Holl sneak in there and get one, and Muzzin had a nice assist in game 2, I think. So I don't know. I'm not ready to be like these guys are the 3rd and 4th best defensemen for the Leafs, and I'm waiting to see what happens when Liljegren gets back, and now that they have a little bit of financial flexibility, do they go out and get a little bit more depth? Mete got called up, so is he going to get in the lineup? Who knows? But at this point, there's just a huge spotlight on Muzzin and Holl, and unfortunately, there's a bit added pressure, which they know. But it just feels like they make that big mistake when it matters, like when the game really matters, or there's a chance to really get one or get a good chance, and they just don't get the puck up. And I even saw Matthews last night was a little bit frustrated with Holl at one point because he wasn't passing the puck up at the perfect time. So those are just little things to keep an eye on. Both of those guys are loved in the dressing room. Like, as far as the media goes, sure, you can scrutinize them all you want, but if you go inside that room, those 2 guys are 2 of the most popular players on the team. So we'll see if, what that plays into going throughout the year and what Dubas decides to do. But I mean, neither of them have huge trade value, so I don't think that's going to be a route. And looks like he's going to, die with that sword. So we'll see what happens.
Alex, if the inconsistencies happen, is do kind of like the goaltending situation, is Dubas forced to try and make a move to try and shake things up on that second pairing? I know early on this season that the Arizona Coyotes have lowered their asking price for Jacob Chikrin. They've been in talks of trying to acquire him. Is that possible? And if so, obviously more so on the right-hand side, they want to try and get another defender. But if Liljegren and Sandin can live up to that, will one trade try and solve it, and then you try to look to things on the right-hand side internally?
I mean, I think that regardless of what you think of Holl's performance this year and his performance on that pairing with Muzzin, I think that regardless, they're going to have to make a trade at some point, because with Liljegren coming back, he looked great towards the end of the season. And at this point, I don't care what people say. He's an NHL defenseman. There is absolutely no reason for him to go back to the AHL or ride the bench or be a seventh guy. I think this guy's he's played himself into a full-time NHL role after a long development. And you're obviously not going to put Rasmus Sandin on the bench after that whole contract, that whole little mini contract holdout heading into the season, where the number one topic of discussion was his playing time. Mm-hmm. I will give credit where credit's due. I've been on the trade Holl train for however long, like probably since the start of last season. And I think, shout out to him, I think he's probably been virtually traded almost as much as maybe like Alex Kerfoot's probably the only other one, but both of those guys always find themselves in the fan proposals. And to his credit, he, outside of that first game against Montreal, Holl's looked good. I think that pairing in general has looked good, but the problem is it is a big risk to take if you're banking on those guys to be one of your best pairings. I mean, they were one of the best pairings I would say in the North Division for a lot of the 2021 season, but the entirety of the 2022 season, the whole conversation was about how those guys can't be put together. And then you saw on Wednesday night last week, they had a couple of horrible plays together. They looked out of place. They looked sloppy. Jake Muzzin had that pizza that he tossed up the middle to Nick Suzuki, which ended up being the game winner for Montreal off of the stick of Josh Anderson. So it's a big question, and it's a big risk when you're sort of forced to ask yourself, are we going to be getting the 2020 version of Justin Holl and Jake Muzzin, or are we going to be getting the one that we saw all last season? So there's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. And I truthfully just don't know how they're going to fit Holl into a role on this team, unless he's cool being the seventh guy more often than not, because at this point, I just don't see Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren being part-time players, I guess is the way to put it, unless they really, really struggle in an increased role and they kind of show that they're not ready for those minutes yet. I really don't see it. So I can understand Kyle Dubas's apprehension to moving Holl for that reason, but I just don't know how they're going to fit all seven of those defensemen on the team when Liljegren comes back. So it's going to be interesting to see how they approach that.
I will say that offensively, they're not as up there as, let's say, Morgan Rielly or the potential that Liljegren and Sandin have. But looking at their numbers right now, again, it's only 3 games and it's still a small sample, as we mentioned before. 55.68 Corsi for percentage with that pairing. 53.81 expected goals for and 52.94 scoring chances for. So they have been getting a little bit more offensive production. And that's something that I was very critical of because they didn't seem to produce quite a bit. But defensively, especially in zone entries, Cam Charron, who was a former analyst for the Toronto Maple Leafs Hockey Research and Development, he has his own website and he's been tracking zone entry or a lot of stats for each game. And he did the zone entry for defense against the Montreal Canadiens. On 4 entry or attempts for Jake Muzzin, he had 4 and 2 of them were controlled. Justin Holl, 6 attempts, 2 were controlled. You go to the Ottawa game right now, Justin Holl, 6 attempts, and there were only 2 controls when he was on the ice. So Justin Holl does have the ability to break plays up. And for me, even with Jake Muzzin, it's the consistency factor. There's a stretch of 4 or 5 games where they look like they're the best pairing. And then you get another 6-7 where, like you mentioned, Alex, Jake Muzzin or Justin Holl is coughing up the puck up the middle, and it's resulting in more sustained zone pressure, as Shane mentioned, where one mistake is just going to result in more time on the defense, and it's just going to wear everybody out. And even what we saw, I believe it was game 4 when Toronto lost 7-3 in Tampa Bay, where Justin Holl turnover, more sustained pressure, and it led to Steven Stamkos scoring the first goal in the playoffs. So again, I do think that there is sort of like that crossroads where you see the best in them, but you also see the worst, and you got to make a decision, because you, in this year where you want to try and go all in and you want to be a serious contender, you got to make a trade that'll benefit the team. And if you could get a top 4 defender that improves on what you have, why not? You shouldn't be afraid to make that move. So we'll see what happens there, because there's still a lot of time. The Maple Leafs, Muzzin and Holl could turn things around. This could be their very first consistent season, and we may not even be talking about this, but it is definitely something that was brought up because of that first game. And now, if they're able to continue that trend, you want the best for them. You want them to succeed. That is the most important thing. But right now, I think we should just take everything in stride, much like Samsonov and Murray and everything else going on in the Maple Leafs right now. Now that the first week is in the books, what is your biggest takeaway from this week? Shane, I'm going to start with you. What caught your eye this week?
For me, it's the third line and how they don't have any identity right now. And I don't really like that mix of Järnkrok, Kerfoot, and Engvall. So that's been one thing that certainly caught my eye. I thought they just didn't play very well last night, specifically Engvall. But I'm a little surprised they've only been able to score 3 goals each of the games. Still waiting for them to break out. I think maybe Monday night against Arizona. Usually that's a point night, so we'll see how the boys do there. But for me, it's the third line, and with Robertson getting called up, and I think maybe if you slot him in on the second line with Tavares and Nylander, and then move Malgin down with Kerfoot and Järnkrok. I think personally that Engvall should be the odd man out right now. So he hasn't done very much at all. So that's for me, that's the move. We'll see how it all shapes up Monday night, but I think the fourth line's got some, crash and bang identity. They've played pretty well. They had a big goal last night. The top 2 lines have looked great. Nylander looks amazing. And it's just going to be a matter of time before Marner and Matthews get going. So for me, mix up that third line. They need a new identity, and I think it starts by benching Pierre Engvall.
What are 2 things can happen with the Arizona Coyotes? It could be a point night, like you mentioned, or it can be a close 2-1 loss, like we saw last season with Karel Vejmelka.
I don't think it was just the close 2-1 loss. You remember how I think the Coyotes scored
that overtime,
12 shots?
Yeah.
Peter Mrazek.
Yeah, that comeback overtime game, only to lose because Jacob Chychrun should have been called for a penalty. But we digress. Alex,
Peter's still holding a grudge.
When it comes to the officiating, we always hold a grudge.
That's right.
Alex, what was your biggest takeaway from the first week?
Shane kind of alluded to it at the end of his point there. I think my biggest takeaway was that Tavares and Nylander are playing like the top line right now. And that's nothing against Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews. I mean, they started off quiet last year as well. Matthews scored 60 goals and Marner had almost 100 points, and he would have crossed that had he played a full season. So it's obviously not something to be worried about right now, but I think a lot of the reason that the Leafs only scored 3 games max in each of their games was that, they did score 3 in each game, but they had 4 against Washington, did they not? Or did I get that wrong too?
It was 3-2.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I don't know what I'm talking about. I think the reason that they only scored the amount that they did is because Matthews and Marner weren't really like the difference makers like we've seen them be in the past. Matthews obviously had the tip-in goal to win the game against Washington there, but there hasn't been a game yet where Matthews and Marner have taken over, and it's been, they've shown that they're the 2 faces of the franchise and like they're taking control of the game, similar to how, we saw McDavid get a hat trick opening night. And obviously that's not the bar we're setting for those 2 guys, but overall, I think Tavares and Nylander have just been more dynamic players to start the year. And, it's a beauty of having that top 4 in the top 6, because if one pairing isn't looking great one night, then you've got another one you can look to. It's just bad when all four of those players are off. But right now, Tavares and Nylander look great. Hoping Matthews and Marner can turn it on soon.
I'm going to build off on what you said, and I made a comment because Tavares was taking drills in practice, and he hadn't played a preseason game, and he had more pep in his step. He was much quicker, and obviously he talked about wanting to get quicker and faster at season's end. And I got a lot of people seem to like the comment. They seem to agree, but there were a lot of other comments that were just LMAO, haha kind of thing. And guess what? We're seeing a quicker, stronger, and more effective John Tavares. I think John Tavares alone has been standing out. Looking at his numbers, he's got 4 points in 3 games, 1 goal, 3 assists. You look at, I had his stats here before. Okay, well, even looking at his underlying numbers, I believe they're still pretty decent right now. And that's what you want from John Tavares. I mean, everyone is going to complain about the contract sale because he's making 11 million. And even though he was just under a point per game and just missed out by 80 points, he was still one of their best players. He was effective no matter how you looked at things. And right now, again, 55 Corsi for percentage, expected goal percentage of 57.23, and high danger chances 50%. That's probably going to go up down as the year progresses, but he's generating offense quite a bit, and he's off to a strong start production wise. And if he doesn't hit a stretch of 12-13 games where he goes goalless, it's going to be a great season for him. And having that chemistry with William Nylander is just taking everything to new heights. I think he's got another step, another gear in his game right now. That's just, you can't help but wonder that, everyone is making fun of the Nylander's contract. And look at that right now, he's still being a top point producer for the Maple Leafs, and he's still making under 7 million. So, I do agree that both of them are playing well, but John Tavares, he alone himself has looked or stood out to me more so, because we knew that William Nylander was still going to be great. It was more, was John Tavares going to regress, or was he still going to maintain that level of consistency? And so far we're seeing that right now. So whoever disagreed with me, I don't want to say everyone's got their opinion, but whoever disagreed with me, JT still looks pretty quick even right now. So that is my biggest takeaway. And as we alluded to throughout the show, the Maple Leafs PR account tweeted out that Nick Robertson, Wayne Simmonds, and Victor Mete were called up as a result of Matt Murray being placed on LTIR. Now, obviously, Victor Mete could get in. Wayne Simmonds can try and work his way back and try and battle and be an energy factor on that fourth line. But the biggest question is Nick Robertson, because we all thought that he had a fantastic preseason. Obviously, he was a victim of the salary cap, essentially, with his contract. He wasn't waiver exempt. Dennis Morgan was, which is why they kept him. He got sent down, and he made his mark in 1 or 2 games in the AHL already. Alex, what does this call-up mean for Nick Robertson?
I think it means that Nick Robertson is going to do everything that he can to force the Leafs to make a move so that he can stay on the team. I mean, everybody knows the reason that he got sent down after his training camp. Some people were upset about it, but I think most people have a good enough grasp on the situation that, in the end, if you keep Robertson and send down Mog and lose him on waivers, then there's a depth player that you just lost. So, yeah. I think that it's a huge opportunity for Nick Robertson. I think he showed all throughout preseason that he's ready for an NHL job. He scored for the Marlies yesterday. I think he's ready to be back, he's ready to come back, and I think he's ready to kind of cement his spot in the lineup for real this time. I don't know who that means gets the shift from the lineup, whether it's Dennis Morgan or whether it's, like you said, Shane, Pierre Engvall's kind of looked off a little bit to start the year, just hasn't really been effective at all. There are options regarding who you can take out of the lineup, but I think Robertson is certainly going to he might be in the lineup on Monday against Arizona. And I think once he gets into the lineup, I think he understands the situation. I think he understands how many forwards the Leafs have. And, it's great that he had an amazing preseason, but if he doesn't continue his preseason antics into the regular season, then there are other guys there that can replace him. So I think he should understand that, while he looked amazing and while there's lots of potential there and he's an exciting player, he's got to keep playing like that to keep his spot. It's not something that's just going to be given to him and locked in just because of his preseason performance. So I'm excited. I hope he gets a look on the second line because, like I said before, Nylander and Tavares have sort of started off hot, and Robertson can probably make that line even hotter. And if not, then I think there's, like you said earlier, Shane, I think there's a spot for him on the third line with Kerfoot and Yarncroke, just considering the fact that their third line isn't a strict checking line the way that it was last year. So it's a big opportunity for him. He looked good, and I'm excited to see what he can bring.
Shane, you alluded to the fact that maybe you try and start him on the third line or the second. Where do you see him come the first game that he plays the season? Because no matter where he was in the lineup in the preseason, he stood out, whether it was a top six forward or bottom six forward on that third line. He played like he was the top player on the ice, no matter what. What's the best spot for him heading into potentially his first game?
I think the best spot would be on that second line and some second power play minutes. I think he's a shooter. He's a guy that can put the puck in the back of the net from absolutely anywhere. So you play him with offensive players if you want the most out of him, and if you want him to excel and potentially reach 20 goals this season, you play him with Tavares and Nylander, and you do that every night. If he's not in the lineup on Monday against Arizona, this is a fail. Like, this player has busted his butt the entire preseason, done everything that the organization has asked for him, got stronger, got faster, still works hard, works on his shot. Everybody on the team knows he has the best shot, and that's coming from
Matthews said that.
Right. And I was going to say that's coming from Matthews, right? So if he's not in the lineup the first game, he's available to play after a preseason where he did everything they could, but because of financial situation and all the hoopla around contracts, and he wasn't able to play, then you know what? The organization's failing the kid. So they need to realize that you can shatter somebody's confidence if you continue to tell them to do something. They do it, and then they're not rewarded. So reward the kid, play him with two of the best players right now on the team, see what he can do. And you know what? If he can't hit the net and he's -4, then so be it. Take him out, but give him a legit chance. Maybe a 3 to 5 game stretch where, listen, go out, perform, do what you do best, and let's see what happens. But yeah, move Malgin down, put him there. I'd keep Malgin in the lineup. He's looked good. If it's him or Engvall coming out, so be it. But one of those two guys should be sitting, and Nick Robertson should be playing.
I think I do agree. You want to try and start him off on that second line. I think it comes down to, whether or not Dennis Malgin can, maintain the consistency as well. I'm not saying that he's looked bad at times, but he has looked a little bit passive. And we saw him, drive hard and be a factor physically in the first game against Montreal, but I really haven't quite seen that same impact against Montreal, against Washington, and against Ottawa. So you may want to try and bump Malgin down to that third line, insert Nick Robertson onto that second, because that's what you want to try and get the most out of him. I do think that at some point, if you rotate between Malgin and Robertson and you have a better sample of who's performing better in the second line, if Nick Robertson is that guy, I think if you got to put someone on waivers or you got to send him down, maybe Dennis Malgin is that guy, because once all the players come back from injured reserve, once you start to get your top roster or your regulars back, you're going to have to make a difficult decision. And if Nick Robertson is going to play well, like he has in the Marlies this season, again, small sample, but 2 points in 2 games. I'm going to read a comment from, this is from Nick Barden. This is a quote from Ryan Hardy, who had to say this about Nick Robertson. I'm confident that the next time his opportunity comes in the NHL, that it might be the last time we see him here, being the AHL. I wholeheartedly agree with Hardy's comment. I do think that if he excels in this time, in these 4 weeks where he's going to be getting a lot of minutes, I think Nick Robertson stays up. I don't see any other way. Like you said, Shane, if you send him back after he does everything right, even here, and he's still a cap casualty result, if he's playing better than Dennis Malgin, he deserves a spot over Dennis Malgin. Even if you have to lose Dennis Malgin on waivers, so be it. You have other players that have played well in preseason, like Alex Steves, Bobby McMahon, come up and have an impact in a depth role while Nick Robertson thrives in that top 6. So I do think that if the time comes and they need to make a decision, and they obviously the start of the season, I get it, preseason, right now, start of the regular season, you want to send him down. But now that this is his time, now that he showed what he's capable of, if he's going to have that repeat performance, he's going to stay up here. And I think this is going to be a big time win for him because, as you mentioned, Shane, his increased speed, his increased strength, weighs 183 pounds right now. So that extra muscle is going to benefit him in the long run. And we see him protect the puck very well. We've seen him in the corners coming out and driving hard to the middle of the ice. That's what Nick Robertson thrives on. And if he continues to do that, again, I can't see any other way of sending him back down because he's looking like an NHLer right now.
Like organizationally, what are you worried about? A 21-year-old second round pick from 3 years ago that hasn't been given a long look, or are you worried about Dennis Malgin?
Yeah.
So
no, absolutely. And again, Dennis Malgin still is young, and you can't discredit the preseason that he had, and you want to give him the look as well. But this is a drafted and developed top prospect. This is a player that you have high hopes for. If again, he has the performance that he has, like he's shown the chemistry with William Nylander, or even in that third line role with Alexander Kerfoot, even if he doesn't produce points, if he's consistent enough and he's working hard, I think that alone should still keep him in the lineup. So going to be interesting couple of weeks, especially for Nick Robertson. And I guess everyone here at Maple Leafs Lounge are hoping that he has a standout performance once again, because what more can he do at this point? Except, just continue doing what you're doing. I don't have anything else other to add to that, because it's strange. It really is. And that really sums up this episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. Before I end it off, any other further comments? Alex, Shane?
Nothing for me.
no, looking forward to Monday night and seeing what they do.
Absolutely. Once again, this episode is brought to you by morningskate.io, the daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday with the latest NHL news, rumors, histories, funnies, quizzes, you name it, all that and more from the terrific writing staff over at the Hockey Writers. You'll see the link in the description below. All you have to do is type in your email and you'll get it in your inbox right away. Once again, for Alex Hobson and Shane Seney, this is Peter Baracchini for the Maple Leafs Lounge, and we will see you next time.